And we are live. It's going to take a minute or two for people to roll in. For those watching later, Robin Dreeke. Now, what I'd like you all to do is consider subscribing if you like what you hear today, because I have not only Robin today, I have Thomas Pecora, who's from the CIA next week, and then I have Jack Barsky, who is an undercover KGB agent the following week. So 3 weeks of 3-letter agencies. You can't beat that. And it looks like we have 6 people rolling in. If people could type a Y over in the comments and let me know if you're hearing everything, that would be awesome. And the cool thing about the comments over there, the live chat, is this is where you can ask questions of Robin, because the whole point of this is everybody ask questions of Robin. He's here to talk to everyone. And I do my best when I interview him to research everything I can, but I know everybody here will have questions. I see Gavin Stone. I see Phoenix Morgan, Deborah Allen, and Phoenix Morgan's here. You invited the gang, Robin.
Yeah, I got a bunch of my Facebook group as well. And you saw him tagged because you're on all my social media as well. A bunch from LinkedIn, Facebook. So hopefully get a bunch of people in, because what else are we doing right now?
That's true. If you know what, I'll take an audience any way I can, if we're captive or not.
It's been a strange transition. You know, I'm the extreme extrovert, but I actually transitioned to this decently. I'm actually kind of getting into the Zoom and doing more of these things, and busy as heck. So we're doing okay.
Well, that's good. And you know, I've been reading your book recently, and one thing that I thought was interesting, if you wouldn't mind spending a moment talking about it, is it sounds like Russia was definitely a lot worse than we thought.
It depends on worse than who thought.
The country. I mean, I didn't read anything about them. I mean,
like the general population.
Sure.
Yeah. Because I mean, from my point of view, they've been the same that they've been since I started working in the FBI. And when I quickly found that out, they've been the same. They've always been since really World War II. You know, so their whole methodology for foreign policy. And this was before the Soviet Union collapsed and they became Russia. So back in the Soviet Union, the United States and NATO allies were considered the #1 enemy. And post-collapse, it went from #1 enemy to #1 threat, but no change in anything. And they've always used a thing called active measures. And I know people that have followed the news more recently in the last 2 or 3 years, I've heard that term active measures before. And what that is it's political influence, or influence in thoughts and behaviors of an adversary. And before the advent of the internet really popped up, they've been doing it forever. You know, they used to use newspaper articles and editorials and things like that, you know, before they had Facebook and Twitter. But the only thing that's changed over time is the tools they've used, the techniques, and their intent has never changed.
Do we do that ourselves?
Everyone does it.
Okay, I was going to say, I mean, we have to push a little bit of propaganda, maybe slip some articles.
Oh yeah, everyone does it. Yeah, and their entire objective was, you know, and I've said this on the news before. I never take a political side, because as soon as you do, half the world will line up against you. That's kind of a guarantee. But the challenge is for anyone in our country to think that Russia takes a side of any American. No, they hate us all. Their main objective is to sow distrust and discontent in our own processes. Because if they can sow discontent and disharmony, that's their benefit. So that's exactly what their objective was, and that's exactly what they did.
Well, I also wanted to talk to you because I have the upcoming guest of Jack Barsky, who he lived undercover in the United States as a mole, I guess, for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I don't really consider him a bad guy, because I consider him to be a patriot just for another country. Yeah. Versus Robert Hansen. And you worked that case. So I'm very interested in that case. And as far as I'm concerned, he can rot in hell.
Yeah. So, and to say I worked that case, I was peripheral involved with it. I always make sure I give the right caveats, because there's a lot more important involved people on that case. I've worked a lot of other cases as well. But he was actually on my squad that I was on in New York right before I got there. And so the folks on my squad knew him pretty well. And again, when the episode in the book where we, my Jedi Master, he's Jesse Thorne in the book, go down to the file room to pull up one of his files. That was very real. And when we pulled that file and we saw that the supervisor had marked it all up, basically blasting him, how could you possibly know this? How could you possibly know that? Well, it's because he actually volunteered first in New York and got rebuffed and then tried again in Washington, D.C. And that's all open source.
Mm. So he was kind of a jerk. Like Alder James was sort of known as being not a very personable, fun guy.
Yeah, and during my career, my main job was most of the time was recruiting, confidential human sources and spies and doing operations like that. And so the other side of counterintelligence is doing espionage investigations. And so I did a decent amount of it, not nearly as much as a lot of other people do. But when I ran the behavioral team, we did assess, I'd say about 25 to 30% of the things we did were those types of cases. And I worked with a great one of the great founders of espionage investigations in the FBI, and he had a great saying that holds very true, and that is, happy people do not commit espionage. And so the first question I would generally ask someone is, that if they're turning in a coworker because they're spiking on all the checklists, like they're spending long hours after work there, they're odd hours, they're asking a lot of questions, all the behavior spikes that people think are a checklist, that if you check off everything on a checklist, you have a spy or an insider. And no, that's not true. Sometimes maybe. Cases I worked, never. But my first question generally was, do you like him or her? And most of the time it would be a coworker breaking down in tears, crying because, oh, he's such a good guy, I love him so much. But he asks a lot of questions. And so the first thing that goes through my mind is, we probably don't have an insider threat here, because the insiders that I've known and worked on both sides were not well liked by anyone. Their management, their coworkers, they're pretty generally unhappy people in some way.
Okay, so a curmudgeon is not likely necessarily going to be that type. They may be grumpy and very concerned about protocols and things like that, but they're not genuinely disliked by too many.
Right. So the thing that I always kind of looked for, again, you never ever judge ahead of time. And this is where sizing people up really comes in. It's taking that emotional side and a bias that you have and putting that aside and just look at information, look at details, cognitively think and collect, without trying to prove for something or against something. But in general, if someone is spiking on all the behavior checklist things and is generally pretty miserable towards people, towards others, and you might want to look a little bit harder at it, maybe.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned a second impression, that you need to have a second impression, because the first impression is kind of a gut, and you can't necessarily go by that.
Well, yeah, it's taken the intuition side out of the equation if possible, because a lot of people will use liking someone as a gauge on, if I like them, I can trust them. And liking someone is generally, again, everything I say is generally, it's a paintbrush swath. I always got a caveat, because I did see someone say that's crap. It's okay. And
that probably is me.
And so in general, liking someone is based on subjective forms from my point of view of similar background, morals, ethics, beliefs, commonalities, interests, proximity. And just because you like someone doesn't mean you can trust someone. So what I'm doing now with trust is I redefine trust very rapidly. Trust is actually can be a very subjective thing, because again, people think if they like you, I can trust you. Well, trust I actually redefine as predictable behavior, because you can actually totally dislike someone, but you can predict what they're going to do.
Interesting. So you can trust them to do blah blah blah, because they will do it every single time.
Absolutely. And if they don't do it the same way again, and that kind of goes to the sign called actions, if they don't do it the same way after you've seen them do a certain thing 3 or 4 times, that means there's been a new input, a new stimulus in their life that caused a behavior shift. And the whole point of the whole book of what I do, and Eric, you've known me a while, and my content, it's all about understanding people and relationships at a very deep level, so you can maintain those good, healthy relationships with open, honest communication, transparency, zero manipulation. And that's the shocking thing, with understanding someone like me or counterintelligence. I did all I could to avoid any sorts of deception, subterfuge, pretext calls, all those things, because here's a guarantee of human behavior. If anyone even suspects you're attempting manipulation in any way, you will not have trust. If you don't have trust, you're not going to have a relationship. And if you don't have trust in a healthy relationship, no one's going to do anything with you, for you, or want to be teamed with you in any way. And also destroys your brand.
Well, and you were dealing with some pretty cagey people too, who probably could sniff out one thing just very slightly off at all. And so I imagine you had to be extra forthright just to make sure that no, I'm being completely clear here with whatever you're saying, to not turn them off.
Yeah, absolutely. Full transparency, and see, what the great thing about transparency is, you can really be transparent even when you can't tell them everything. There's been situations where, I went and interviewed someone, or even a foreign intelligence officer that we might have just happened upon. And one of the questions always is, well, how'd you know I was here? How'd you get my information? How'd you get my number? And I can't tell them that, because that's methodologies and tools and techniques, but I don't beat around the bush. I don't say, well, I just happened to be here by mistake and my kids were taking us, no. I say, listen, just like I respect your privacy and I would never share this conversation with anyone else outside of who you're comfortable with, I can't share these other things because of rules, process, and procedures, because we protect people, we protect our techniques so that we can protect everyone. So you're transparent about what the boardroom's saying behind you, even though they're saying what you can and can't do. Because the last thing I'd always say during any kind of interaction with someone, especially a first contact, and this is whether you're dealing with sales, as I always start out by saying, trying to recruit spies or trying to recruit human beings to be great resources for national security and great patriots, it's the same as selling a product. Because I'm selling a subjective thing, which is American patriotism, to generally people that may not want to buy it. And so the last thing I would leave someone with is, I said, hey, please ask me any questions you have whatsoever, because if I leave you and you say to yourself, I wonder what he really wanted, I totally failed you.
Are you selling American patriotism specifically, or are you just selling yourself as a person and just saying, look, I could really use your help? Because there are some people, I think, who maybe don't believe in democracy. Maybe they don't believe in capitalism, but maybe they still help you.
Yeah. Basically, I always kind of give that broad paintbrush again. I'm selling American patriotism. No, I'm actually willing to offer whatever resources I actually have access to personally and professionally, and seeing if it's a resource they need in terms of their priorities, because that's what you're ultimately doing, whether you're selling a service, like insurance, or you're selling automobiles, or you're trying to recruit someone on board. It's the same as customer relations, really, with a lot of the finance companies I work with. And that is, I'm trying to identify the priorities of others, which is basically everyone. Here's what makes people very predictable is we will always, again, in general, act in our own best interest in terms of
wait a minute. Yeah, your book even said anybody who says always, that's
extremes. You got it, because everyone will always find a way to poke a hole in it. So I'm like, yeah, in general, but a large percentage of the general people, we will always act in their own best interest in terms of safety, security, and prosperity for ourselves and our families. And what we're dealing with now with COVID-19 is a great example of we're acting in our own best interest for safety, security, and prosperity. People, I think, in general, are doing a great job of distancing, but at the same time, we're doing a really good job of taking care of our neighbors. We're doing a good job of taking care of our loved ones the best we can. I mean, the whole point of people wearing masks is not because to keep you from getting sick. It's actually in courtesy to someone else. Right. So you don't spread if you have it and you're asymptomatic. That's a courtesy. That's actually taking care of someone else. And so we're hardwired for these things. So all I have to do is figure out what you think is in your best interest, and I know what you're going to do. And if I have resources that happen to overlap with your best interests, there you go.
Cool. We got a couple comments coming in.
Sure.
One of your favorite sayings, and I think it's one of the best sayings of all time.
It took me a while to learn how to say it too. When I was doing my audiobook, it was kicking my butt.
I didn't know if you spoke Russian. That was one of my questions.
So I speak I can read it. So when I was on the streets of New York in my first couple of years there, and I was outside on the East River walkway there, waiting for code clerks to come out, I would literally sit on a bench there with a English-Russian dictionary, teach myself the phonetic alphabet of Cyrillic so I could sound things out. So I can literally maybe read a business card and read people's names, and I could probably read that better if it was in Russian than it was in English.
All right, and that's trust but verify.
Yeah, trust but verify, absolutely.
And I had the DEA agents that were covered in Narcos, and I think it's Platos e Plano, which is another one, or something like that, which is essentially silver or lead. I love all these cute little.
All right, they're cute.
Russians and Pablo Escobar, not exactly. All right, we've got a question here from Paul Galovich.
Yeah, I know Paul.
All right, well, Robin.
Excuse me, that's bad.
Does social engineering play a part, or is that off limits, like violating trust? Sometimes social engineering is good.
Yeah. So, Paul, when I first met, we got a mutual friend, Chris Hagnaghi, a great social engineer and also a great human being. He actually founded the Innocent Lives Foundation as well, and we protect children the best we can from online predators and human traffickers of children. And because he is on the internet, he's helping companies protect themselves against, people trying to hack in, and he stumbled across, a lot of individuals on the dark web that were not thinking in the best interest of children and really heinous. And so they use all their great security skills to uncover these anonymous people and hand it over to law enforcement. And Chris is a social engineer. And so there's, the word social engineering always has that connotation of taking advantage of someone. Right. To me, I always define it as deeply understanding someone is much different to me. So social engineering can be however an individual defines it. So yeah, there's social engineers that use it for bad, that they want to take advantage of people and elicit their PIN numbers or dates of birth, all the personal identifying information that can really compromise them. And then you have folks that understand the skill set and they teach that knowledge to others to help protect themselves against those people that would take advantage of them. And so it really depends on whether you're that white hat or dark hat. And so I think if you go into it understanding that when you are using those tools, especially when you're trying to help a company and you're using the tools to elicit the information you shouldn't be eliciting them from, in that instant, you are actually using manipulation and you are a bad social engineer. But as soon as that they trip over themselves and do something they shouldn't do, that's when the good guys kick the training in. It's like, all right, good on you. You did something you shouldn't have done. But the greatest thing is you didn't hurt anyone. You didn't hurt themselves. Take this training. We're going to fix this problem. No harm, no foul. And now everyone will get better. So that's what Paul's talking about, I believe.
Well, and that's one thing I actually appreciate about you a lot, even though I feel like you wear a hair shirt sometimes, is that you seem to be overly sensitive about narcissism or super concerned that you may slide into it at any point, all the way to one of my favorite quotes is from a supervisor, and it might have been Jesse. I don't remember which. It was in Code of Trust when he talked about how you screwed up a mission, and they said, yeah, but don't beat yourself up about it, because then that's about you too.
Right. Excuse me. Sorry. So yeah, I am a hypersensitive about self-centeredness, because I am hardwired for hardcore self-centeredness. During the first part of my career, both in the Marine Corps and to a large extent in the FBI, and throughout most of our lives, before you become more self-aware about your impact on others. I guess that's what it is. I started seeing my impact on others, and when it was negative, there it is. There's a Russian of it. So when you become hypersensitive to the impact on others, you start realizing that, wow, all my actions have been in terms of me and making myself look good, regardless of the impact it has on you. Because when you're young and you start out a career, you think the way to get ahead and be successful and look good and get promotions and everything else was to make yourself look good. And that's an easy thing to fall in the trap of. And it's also, you're missing the big component of what actually is the foundation of being successful in anything you're trying to do. And that is, you need people, you need relationships, and the healthier, stronger relationships you have, you can accomplish anything. You can teach a monkey to flip a switch, which is basically all the things that most of us do every day in life. But without the relationships to bring it to market, to bring it to fruition, to to bring all the different ideas together. You, as I said numerous times, you can have the best genetics and biology on the face of the planet, but if you don't have relationships, you might as well be a moron on top of a mountain by yourself, because you will go nowhere. That's just a simple fact in life that I learned later on. And so I'm a big proponent of everything you can do. My big anchor with everything is, if you start out, a challenging situation with another human being, ask yourself, is what I'm about to do or say going to help or hinder that healthy relationship? And if it's going to hinder it, I just shut up until I can figure out what's going to help it.
Yeah. Why do so many supervisors get that wrong? Because you see that over and over and over, where an employee or team member does something and the supervisor grabs credit. And it's silly, because all the supervisor has to do is credit the team member. And then guess what? They look like a damn good supervisor. The team member gets the credit, and they're leading a great team. Everybody's doing well.
Yeah. There's two things I think there's many things that contribute to that, but I think the two main things that people generally have happen that causes that negative behavior as leaders is, one, insecurities. They think by bumping someone up, it makes them look lesser. So being insecure about you, a good friend of ours just published a book called on the imposter syndrome. So a lot of these people don't actually think they're worthy of the title and position they have, and they're afraid to be frowned out as a fraud. His name is Billy Boatwright, by the way, and shout out to him. And then, so that's part of it. And then the other part is, which is the kind of the camp I fell into. Luckily for me, I cared very deeply about people. And every time I wound up, my self-centeredness wound up wronging someone by accident, boy, did it hurt me. I was crushed. It's like, what the hell did I do wrong? And I couldn't figure it out until I actually was seeing and analyzing what great people like Jesse were doing, and like figuring it out. But what happens is, when we're younger, in general, before that prefrontal lobe's fully formed, before you're 24 years old, all the things we experience, all those emotional things, make an impact on us. And so what generally happens to us hardcore type A's is that we go out for sports or we join clubs, and eventually you're probably put in some sort of leadership position. Say it's like I did football and I did track. And so, like, say you did football and you got a team around you, and one day the coach decides to say, hey, Robin, we want to see what kind of leadership skills you have today. And they say, so what we need you to do is, we have 5 minutes to practice. And we need everyone over by the hitting dummies over there. And so you got all the guys, over here, got the hitting dummies over there. And so get them from point A to point B in 5 minutes, go. And so your first reaction is, as a type A guy, you naturally will go and engage. Say, hey guys, we need to get from here to here in 5 minutes. Let's go. As teenagers will typically do, they're going to totally ignore you. And so what happens is they ignore you. They're not moving. The coach then comes by and says, what's wrong with you? You're not a strong leader. You just need to be a stronger leader. And so what do? You yell, you cajole, you poke, you prod, and they move. And then after you use the negative reinforcement of threats to move from point A to point B, the coach will then reinforce it, saying, wow, you're a strong leader. You're really good. So your first impressions, if it's in that area of that kind of leadership style, that's what you think leadership is. And so as you get older, you when you first enter organizations in your 20s and 30s, you start using that kind of style. And when you're a worker bee, it can produce some great results. These people with, like myself, with type A's, you push, you prod, you push, you cajole people, and you can get some results. And when you get results, your boss looks good and the people above you look good, and they promote you. And so as soon as you just get promoted once, it starts fading. And then to get promoted again, you might make one more. But then all of a sudden, when you start treating the people under you as things and thinking they're following you because your title and position, that's when it starts failing. And so because they're not going to do anything for you, your stats fall off, everyone starts looking bad. And so they start thinking to themselves, I must have just gotten soft. I got to get tough again. And so they start hammering, and you start hammering, and that's when it all falls apart. So insecurities and bad experiences not bad, because it is what it is. Experiences growing up that you haven't outgrown yet, as I should say.
Okay. I have a question here from Flugel Snort. That's a interesting name there.
Sorry.
How would your lesson change when dealing with someone of the opposite gender?
Actually, I was just asked this the other day. I did a webcast for Harvard yesterday for their Intel group, and my approach has never changed. And here's what I mean by that. I'm always I try to be hypersensitive to watching and observing the impact I'm having. So I'm trying very hard to make sure that the conversation is about others and not myself. So I'm always making sure I include one of these 4 things in everything I say and do. Because when you're saying one of these 4 things and theme it on this, the conversation shifts from self-centered to you to onto them. So here's what I'm always doing. I'm seeking thoughts and opinions of others. Because when you're seeking thoughts and opinions of others, you're saying, I value you and I want to affiliate you. We're genetically and biologically coded to want to belong to meaningful groups and organizations and be valued by them. And this is how you do it. You seek their thoughts and opinions. Second is, I'm talking in terms of their priorities, their needs, wants, dreams, and aspirations. And again, if I don't know what they are, I can assume that's going to be safety, security, and prosperity for themselves and their loved ones. Third, I'm going to be validating the things they say without judging them. And doesn't mean I'm necessarily agreeing. I'm just seeking to understand them. I have a curiosity about them. And finally, I'm empowering them with choices. Like a typical thing I would always say to someone I was asking a favor of in any realm ever, I'd say, if that's something you're comfortable with. It's such a nice, easy way to say, hey, you don't have to. Here's what I'm hoping you'll do. And so what I'm doing these things, what I'm now looking for is I'm watching your nonverbals. And I was trained by some of the best in the world. Joe Navarro is a great friend of mine, wrote the book, What Everybody Is Saying. And he can tell you everything from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. And it's fantastic if you have 2 people that one's talking and listening and the other's watching the nonverbals, but usually it's just me. And so I'm basically looking what we are here. And that's why people say, can we do the same things now with Zoom calls and Skype and everything now that we're more remote as we are in person? A lot of it is. You really can, because what I'm looking for while I'm doing these things and making it about the other person, whether you're male or female, is I'm looking for nonverbal congruence. I'm looking for comfort displays. I'm looking for smiling. I'm looking for a little head tilt, exposing that carotid artery, eyebrow elevation, ventral displays, basically anything up and out, as opposed to I say something that might be off-putting, I'm going to get this, the eyebrow furrow, lip compression, blocking, blading, coming in. So I'm making sure that I'm making the conversation about them, and I'm looking for nonverbal congruence. And so I'm hypersensitive to it. And so if it's a female and I'm being creepy in some way, believe me, I know exactly what I can and can't say, because I have really creeped the hell out of people before, and I made sure I've never done that before. Again. So I tend to not shift anything in terms of gender, ethnicity, background, demographic. I'm always just, because when you have a curiosity about someone else and you're deeply interested in them and understanding them, I have personally found it's kind of universal. Now, if I'm taking a bias I have on what I'm expecting you to be like, and I need to adjust myself to an expectation of you, and I'm guessing wrong, that's where I think people can really make mistakes. If you think you have to do something over above the top, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you only know that once you engage. So I always like to first assess, am I making a connection? And I move slow, because again, the tempo is not up to me. The tempo is up to them. And if I'm pushing the tempo too fast, I will get the nonverbals of stress, and I'll back off. Patience is key. Just because you know how to make a conversation about others and know how to build a relationship does not mean they want one with you now. Might take some people days, might take some people weeks, months, years, might never be ever. I've worked some cases where someone told me right up front they wanted to help. I've had some cases where it was a couple months, and literally the day I retired, there was one case I was working for. Matter of fact, it's the case in the Code of Trust my entire career. Wow. Hopefully he still got my email address. Hopefully he'll reach out one time, but so far, no.
You brought up a good point about just because you can read people or read the body language doesn't necessarily mean that you share that with them.
Right.
Because that could flip them out.
Yeah, it's so funny. Years ago, when I first started doing that, they used to call it mirroring, body language mirroring. And it can, like if someone tilts their head, you tilt their head with it. And so you can kind of see, are you in sync? You match when you intentionally match your tempo of your speech, the words you're using. They used to call it mirroring. And it's very effective. But the problem is, if it's discovered that you're intentionally doing it, trust is gone again, because it looks like manipulation. Because remember, it doesn't even matter if you are manipulating or not. All it matters is it perceived as that. So I actually stopped teaching that, and I hate mirroring. Yeah, I do too. So So here's when if you're actually making it about the other person and doing one of those 4 things where you're seeking their thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of their priorities, validating, giving them choices, you will, all these other aspects that people think you have to intentionally do, they're actually naturally going to sink on their own. So I actually try to go deeper and, I stay away from the surface attempts of matching. They don't even call it mirror anymore. They call it matching. I stay away from intentionally doing those things. Cause again, if I'm thinking about what I have to do, then I'm not listening to you. And the most important thing in the world is every single word they're saying, because again, what's our whole goal is to talk in terms of their priorities. Well, everything that comes out of their mouth is one of their priorities. And if you're missing half of it, you don't know what the hell to talk about. You don't know what's important to them, because all you're doing is, what your priorities are. All you're trying to do is look for opportunities to align priorities that are similar. And the only way you can do it is to get rid of a script you're trying to do or things you're trying to do non-verbally. Just be natural, be curious about them, talk in terms of their priorities, validate them without judging them, give them choices, and seek their thoughts and opinions, and everything will start to align.
Got a question here that I think goes well with
I know there's a lot of good ones in there.
Gavin Stone is an author. He's got a fiction book coming out, and he does a lot of body language. Hi, Eric. Hi, Robin. Are there any warning signs or phrases, etc., that act as red flags when a person might be going out of their way to try to prove trustworthy, but actually have the opposite effect?
Try to prove yourself trustworthy.
I'm guessing
so
I'm not sure. He can correct if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking it might be. Are there techniques or something where you are trying to prove it, but you actually will sabotage yourself?
Yeah, I think the big thing is when you're not paying attention to the tempo of the other person. There are, as a matter of fact, I'm going to give credit to a good friend of mine, Jack Shaver. He wrote the book called The Like Switch. He was also on my team with me. As a matter of fact, he was the first team leader of the first BAP assessment I did, the behavioral assessment. And I remember after I was the writer for it, after I wrote it up, he was on the phone for about 4 hours with me, correcting my grammar and correcting everything. And he is a wordsmith god when it comes to language. But he's also, he came up with these called relationship accelerators. And I do talk about them in sizing people up. And relationship accelerators can be effective as long as you're not pushing the tempo of the other person. And so here's the accelerators, and here's what you got to be on guard for, that you can really, because again, if your intent is to try to develop that trust and that healthy relationship, so you're trying to use these accelerators in a very genuine, sincere, altruistic way, because you want a good, healthy relationship. Remember, your tempo doesn't matter. Their tempo matters. And so here's what they are. And one of them is proximity. The closer you are in proximity to someone, the more the better the relationship has tempo-wise. In other words, it's your ability to develop that rapport and that trust is a lot easier when you're one-on-one, live, as opposed to, this is the second best thing. I think these Zoom calls and live streams, I think they're fantastic, because like right now, you're in my house, you're in your house, everyone's watching from the house. I mean, I could flip this around, you can see my backyard. I mean, this is great because this is good. The second one is duration. Are we talking for 3 to 5 minutes?
Hey, to interrupt, but go back to proximity for a second. Is it not only how close you are, but how you are standing with each other? Like side by side might be easier to stand closer to somebody than necessarily head on.
Sure. And again,
do it?
Now that actually is gender dependent. Males can actually do a straight on like this. Females are going to want a little body blading, especially with the opposite gender. So my rule of thumb when it comes to body distance and positioning is I'm watching theirs and I'll give them twice that distance. Like if I walk up to someone, even that I know or don't know, and their first reaction is to take a step back, I will take 2 steps back. I want to make sure, because part of my first little book, 10 Techniques of Quick Rapport, is called Accommodating Nonverbals. And what I mean by accommodating nonverbals is you need to demonstrate that I'm accommodating your comfort level. And so by doing that, if you do it well and you're conscious of it, what I've witnessed from other people is when I take 2 steps back, they'll generally take a half step in. So it's one of those things like, hey, I'll test it. I'm giving you space. And then if you do have some semblance and they're willing to give you some trust and some rapport, they'll take a little step in. So yes, so proximity does matter, but I generally will start out at a typical Western distance. It's not quite 6 feet, but a little closer.
Are you familiar? You're familiar with Mark Bowden, correct?
I know the name well. Yeah.
I think you guys just did a thing in Florida.
Yeah.
Chris Head nagging.
Yep.
He suggests that when you're standing, that they're able to see your feet without looking down. Like they can just see your feet out of the corner of their eyes as a comfortable distance.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good rule of thumb. And he said, always thought women were more comfortable. I might have gotten it backwards head on as compared to, maybe it's men at the angles. I might have gotten it backwards.
Sorry, I interrupted anyway. So what was the second item you were bringing up?
Yeah, so second is duration of time. So are you engaging someone for 3 minutes, or are you engaging someone and they're willing to engage for like 30 minutes or an hour? So the longer the duration is good. And the last one I like to really focus on is intensity. Intensity is the topic of conversation, the depth of, curiosity someone has. Are you talking about a quick quid pro quo, quick business deal? Or are you actually talking about, how you grew up, where you grew up, things in your house? So one of the things, I've been recommending to a lot of people in business right now that are no longer taking clients out for happy hours and things. I said, the virtual happy hour is fantastic, but just don't do it like we are with a blank wall behind me. Show the house. Here's an opportunity where you had an office space environment before. You go out to the same, typical bar or something, and all of a sudden you have an opportunity for higher intensity because you are actually seeing people in their natural habitat. That's pretty phenomenal that you can actually do that. Think about it now. Even all the, right now, I think celebrities are either endearing, few of them are endearing themselves to people because you can actually see, wow, they're actually living pretty simply. And then some are trying to put on these big shows, and you're seeing these big things that said, oh, I'm socially isolated on like 25 acres of horse farm, with their entire staff with them. I'm like, yeah, you don't get it.
Or they're being ironic. I think Arnold is doing that ironically pretty well.
I didn't see his. I got to look.
Yeah,
but anyway,
the cigars in the tub, and
So yeah, and then the final one also is frequency. So it depends, and frequency, that really then comes up to all these things dependent on the other person. So I want to make sure I'm watching the indicators. Am I pushing too fast, too hard in all these different areas? But those are things you can try. But again, I would be very, very observant at the impact you're having.
Now, to reach back to intensity, just for one more question on it, that's not necessarily relevant to the business at hand. It could be a hobby or something that you have in common, or just something that you're excited about, period.
Absolutely. I've had people that both coworkers as well as others that, I had zero in common professionally. Matter of fact, they thought I probably sucked at what I did. I thought they sucked at the way I did, but we formed such great relationships because one thing that I do in my life is I do not allow people to bother me. And that is, if you have a behavior or something about you that is off-putting to me, the first thing I do is make sure we don't talk or deal with that aspect of you in your life. I got to find what you're great at, because a guarantee, that lots of guarantees with human beings in general, we're always acting in our own best interest. And the other thing is we're all working on something. I use that funny anecdote. We're all born pretty perfect. The world messes us up for about 19 to 20 years. And then we spend the rest of our lives to undo those first 19 years. We all have insecurities. We all have shame. We all are embarrassed about things we've done. And so some people have appropriate behaviors when they deal with their insecurities, and some people have let them go. And some people, it flares up all the things that are inappropriate behaviors. And so if someone flares up one of their inappropriate behaviors because of insecurities, first thing I do is I think in terms of what did I do to cause them to do that, so I can identify my behavior that induced the negative behavior, so I can stop that. And then I will find their greatness, because one guarantee is we're all working on something. The other guarantee is everyone has greatness, and shame on you if you don't take the time to figure out what that is. Okay. When I find that greatness, it's good.
Definitely. I'm going to jump around a little bit in the chat so that way I can keep it somewhat topical.
I know. I'm sorry. We've got a lot of good stuff.
No, that's perfectly fine. I will try to cover everybody though. But how do you apply these principles you just described with a narcissist that you have to deal with, i.e. a boss, coworker, loan officer?
Yeah. So narcissism. So one thing, we had a rule on our team that it's a term of art. So in other words, that's a clinical diagnosis. And if you do, I don't have I'm not a licensed clinician, so I won't like diagnose and talk in terms of the clinician side of narcissism. So basically what you have in general is someone who is highly self-centered and insecure is a good way to think, I think, of narcissism as a layman's term for myself. And so so the code of trust and the way I interact with people is generally effective. And that is, even with a narcissist, if you just discover what their priorities are, and you talk in terms of those priorities. A lot of narcissists I knew that I worked with, they loved name dropping. They loved touting themselves, saying how awesome they were, saying what great projects they always worked on, taking credit for all the things you did. That's a typical kind of work behavior you'd see. So you want them to stop the behavior with you, validate it. Because a lot of times, when someone's doing an inappropriate behavior and not socially acceptable, the first thing we want to do is battle it and confront it and get them to shut up and prove that they're wrong. Why? I can guarantee you what's going to happen if you do it. It will not change the behavior. You're going to make it worse. You're fanning the fire. If you want it to go away, if they think they're great at name dropping, if they think they're great at career advice, then seek their advice. Just because their delivery might suck, their content might be okay. But you only know it if actually you engage it. Because what I've noticed is if you engage someone like that and validate their insecurities, because that's normally what narcissists do, is they do a lot of that, then they stop doing it in front of you because they don't have to feel like they have to prove themselves to you anymore. So once you accept that, it generally stops. Now, that's one type. The other type that people generally work for is the type of guy that's the bully boss. He's doing the same narcissistic things, but they love changing their objectives and priorities every day to keep you off balance. So how do you deal with that? Well, the only thing you can't change, because here's the thing, people generally don't change. And if they do, it's very slow. I always think of people as like the Titanic, big ship, small rudder. So you have an aha moment in life where you have this self-awareness and you're going to change that rudder. And if you change rudder, how long is it going to take for that ship to start changing direction? Pretty long time. So if you have the type of individual that constantly does not want to engage, or they're constantly shifting up priorities, because remember, want to talk in terms of their priorities, be a resource for their success is generally what you do for everyone, especially narcissists. If you want them to just shut up and leave you alone, then the only thing you can do is then not have the people around the narcissist be bothered by them. And so that, in other words, people don't bother me. You can be a narcissist all you want around me. You're not going to impact me because that's your problem. It's not my problem. I can count on one hand the number of people's opinions that matter to me in my life. And if you start berating me, then all right, I'll listen to your content. I'll try to ignore the way in which you're delivering it to me. And I'll make a choice. Is the content valid or is it not valid? And if it creates unhealthy relationships, then I just make another choice. I can either choose to deal with it and suck it up or not. But again, it just makes it more of a cognitive thought process. So your emotional hijacking floods away. I'm able to do that. It took a long time because I love battling. That's that type A in me. But when I stopped reacting to people like that, and people around me started saying, how do you not let so-and-so bother you? I said, well, that's his problem, not mine. Well, he did this, this, and this to you. I said, well, I hope he feels better, boy, because I'm fine. Because when you live life honoring those my three anchors, and that number one is a good, healthy professional relationship, and I'll do everything I can to foster it. And I don't care whether you're a jerk to me or not. I will do all I can to foster a healthy relationship, because I'm not judging your life. I'm not judging your path. That's your problem. Second is I'm going to have open, honest communication, transparency, because the best way to have a healthy relationship is maintain situational awareness of everyone around you. Generally, narcissists are insecure because they don't feel they have situational awareness, because their behavior is pushing everyone away. And so when you push people away, they're not getting information. So they're fueling their own problems and fires. So my third anchor is I'm an available resource for the success and prosperity of others without expectation of reciprocity. And that goes for coworkers, friends, family, people above you, below you. And when you take those behaviors and you don't allow people, in other words, my personal motto on this is I never allow myself to be collateral damage in anyone else's insecurities. Okay. It's their problem.
This rolls in a little bit with what you were saying from Flugel Snort. Awesome, man, again. Can you provide an example of how you might validate someone?
Yeah.
Do you mean giving a compliment or an encouraging statement?
Encouraging statement could be closer. Compliments, I'm not a big compliment guy. Flattery, things like that, it can fall very surface and it can look very transparent. Like you're trying to, like if I give you, hey, man, that's a really great shirt you're wearing. That's a great headset that you have. That can stand by for manipulation potentially. As opposed to, if you want to validate someone, the difference is instead of saying that's really great, you can validate a choice. You say, hey, I'm in the market as well. You know, I have these bows and I don't think they're probably nearly as good as you. Where did you get those? And do you like them? In other words, I'm seeking your thoughts and opinions. I'm validating that you made a better choice than I did. What recommendations you have for me? You know, so the difference is the one is a surface flattery that doesn't require response. The second is I'm digging deeper to try to understand, and I'm curious about who you are, the choices you made, and I'm saying that you have an expertise I don't have, and I want it. And if you're willing, I'd love to share it.
Nice. Let me see. I'm going to try to get some more through here. Do you ever use direct approaches for logical folks you try to recruit?
I'm assuming what I'm guessing is I've sometimes show email examples I have when I actually send an email to someone, and they can be very verbal, very long. And I've had some people say to me, Robin, if you ever send me an email that long, I wouldn't even get past line 1. I'd delete it because I'm more of a direct person. And I'm like, absolutely. That's why I would not send that email to you. I'm sending it to this person. So yes, if some people, you know, are more cut and dry, you know, just the facts, ma'am, let's cut to the chase. Absolutely. Because remember, the whole point is talk in terms of their priorities. If one of their priorities is a method of communication that is more direct, more succinct, more linear, what am I going to do? I'm going to do the best I can to accommodate that. And here's the other thing too. If there's things I can't do, because people sometimes ask me, so Robin, what do I do if I just have natural resting angry face? You know, and this is actually me being happy. How do I handle that? That's actually easy too. Self-deprecating humor is a fantastic way to disarm people and build trust. And so you can merely, if you start out and it's the first contact or meeting with someone, you can just start out by some self-deprecation humor and say, listen, as we start chatting together, you're probably going to notice I might be looking like this. I want you to understand, this is not me being angry. This is me being fascinated by you. So before it goes any further, just know I have that resting angry face. And that means I'm fascinated by you. So please continue. And what you're showing is openness, honest, transparency, and you're demonstrating I have a lack of insecurities. And people tend to trust people that are more secure than insecure. And so I think if you find yourself in a situation where you know you don't have a skill set that a particular engagement is going to need, disarming them by saying it up front sometimes does work. Like I am not a linear thinker whatsoever. I'm an intuitive. I'm all over the place. And I once had a great human being that was a fantastic source for the FBI. And he was literally a rocket scientist, but he was he's such a conscientious thinker. We'd be sitting there having a nice dinner and we'd be going through, the agenda and things that, he was doing. And every time he'd say something, I get an idea. And I say, oh, wow, if we use this, he goes, no, shut up. He goes, let's go through the list first. Old business first, then, like the Addams family, old business, then new business. So old business first. And so I had to sit there patiently as I'm thinking of a million things I wanted to do with item 2. I mean, meanwhile, he's waiting for 50. So big thing is you got to accommodate them, their tempo, the way they engage. And so, yes, that can be challenging.
Wow. Is there any way to deal with political zealots on the subject of difficult people?
Same thing. Seek to understand. So the example I love to do if you're dealing with politics today, and things have become so transparent and bipolar. So you don't have to say politics. Say you watch Fox News and I watch CNN. We now know where everyone stands. And what generally happens is that someone that is on the opposite side of you will give their thoughts and opinions. And us as human beings, we are generally coded to, we have this incessant need to want to correct others. And so you give me your thought and opinion, and I say, no, I think that's BS. Here's what I think. What's the likelihood of them listening if you have that approach? Zippo, nada. As opposed to, how can I inspire them to want to listen to me? Because I can't convince them to. How do I inspire them? And so when I deal with someone deal. If when I encounter and want to engage healthy with someone that has a different point of view that I might have, be curious. And so use those 4 things. So if they give me their point of view, instead of negating it and not validating it, remember, validation doesn't necessarily mean you're agreeing. It means you're just seeking to understand. Say, wow, I never heard anything quite like that exactly. Help me understand. How did you come up with that? So you're seeking their thoughts and opinions. After they share more in-depth their thoughts and opinions, you're going to start getting what is called context, because context is what it is to that individual. There is no right or wrong. And this is where, the sizing people up comes up, is if you start judging someone as right or wrong, you're going to really get shields up on people, as opposed to just seeking to understand what they think is right from their perspective. And so help me understand how you came up with that. They share their thoughts and opinions. I now validate it by saying, wow, you gave me a lot more things to think about than I had before we had this chat. I'm curious, what do you think about this? And now you seek their thoughts and opinions about the things you wanted to tell them in the first place. The likelihood of them hearing it is 100%, because you don't plant seeds with people by telling them what you think. You plant seeds with people by asking them what they think, because the brain just engages that thought process. And that's how you inspire someone to listen to them. Listen to you. You make it about them. And one way you make it about them is seeking thoughts and opinions. So you make the statements you want to make. Instead of making a statement, make it a question.
Awesome. And I'm going to do a Robin Dreeke on you and reach back, because you mentioned about everybody wanting to be correct. There's a great story that Chris Hadnagy tells in his book about social engineering, that I guess you helped him extract ATM pins from everybody at a table nearby by simply saying aloud and having an argument about what would be a good pin number.
Yep. Yeah, that's back in the day. So I call life a continuum and a process. I sometimes get people now say, "Hey, Robin, let's go out to dinner. You can go play with people. Show what you can get. You can get their PIN numbers and their dates of birth." And I said, no. I said, I needed to do that to understand why that worked, but I don't not play with people anymore, because it is just wrong. But yes, you can do that. So people have this incessant need to correct others, and the easiest solicitation technique that nefarious bad people will do to garner your personal information is use what's called an intentional misstatement. And so if they start developing trust with you and some rapport by seeking your thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of priorities, validating you, empowering you with choices, they accommodate your nonverbals so that your shields are getting down, and you have a conversation. Somewhere during that conversation, what they're going to do is, make an intentional misstatement. Say you're at a Barnes and Noble and you're trying to, find out, things you need to get positive ID on someone, which is a name, a date of birth, a home record, employment, that kind of thing. You can't ask those questions. So a nefarious person will say, "Hey, I'm trying to, I'm curious. I'm trying to buy something special for my wife's birthday coming up. Any recommendations?" Person opens up and say, "Well, I'm trying to buy something for my husband's birthday." I said, "Oh, really? Are you like us? You must be all in the same month. You must be." And so, "Oh no, I'm in January." I said, "The 1st? No, the 2nd. And my husband's in June. The 19th? No, the 21st. I said, "So you must be a local girl." "Oh, no, I grew up in Oklahoma. My father moved here when he was a pastor." So all you're doing is you're making statements, and then people have this incessant need to correct you. Meanwhile, you did not ask one question, because when you ask questions, people's alerts go up. The master manipulators and the horrendous people in the world that are using that stuff for nefarious thing, they're going to make statements and have you correct them. So that's what Chris was talking about there. So yeah, we would go out, and that's, again, when you're training social engineers to protect others, you train others to understand exactly what the bad people are doing. So you become alert to the content more than the technique, because it's hard to pick up the technique when people are good. But what you can be alerted to is the content and what you're about to say.
Okay. Got a question or comment from Mujtaba Alam. Hopefully I'm saying it right. I apologize.
Chris Voss.
Oh yeah. I've had Voss on. We've talked about Voss. One thing I learned from Chris Voss is repeating the last few words of their sentence. "Yeah, I used to work with Project Z with Mr. A." Possible response: "You worked with Z with Mr. A?"
Yeah. So it's called a reflective question. And reflective questions are fantastic, because, again, you're seeking thoughts and opinions, and actually, instead of saying, "Hey, tell me more about Mr. Z or A," because that's now a question, you reflect the last question. So what it is, so I term it as an empowerment with choice. You're reflecting the last thing they said back on them, and it's empowering them with choice about how they want to answer. So they can either expand upon it more, or they just validate, "Yeah, just Mr. A." So it's a great technique because you're also paraphrasing, which is also part of active listening, but you're also empowering them with choice about how they respond. And so again, by reflecting it, you made that conversation instead of making the question about you, because when you ask a question, you're seeking content, but when you reflect it back onto them, it's empowerment with choice. So it makes it about them. So they're actually dopamine starts flowing.
It makes a lot of sense.
Isn't that kind of crazy?
Well, I would also think too, it's sort of like
Sneaky.
if you write things down. Of course, you would hate me. I never take notes, so I just failed one of your quizzes.
No,
But
you don't have to. Well, you don't have to. Here's what we teach this all the time, and I do too. When you actually have nothing to say, you'll remember everything someone else says. And so I give this listening test for people to do on their own.
Mhm.
So when we're as human beings, since we're constantly testing the world around us for acceptance and being valued, what we're constantly doing is when we hear someone share an anecdote or story, within microseconds, we have a similar anecdote or story that our brains are saying, share this, share this, share this, because you're saying, hey, all right, we have this similarity. Let me tell you why we're even more similar. Let me test. Do we have affiliation? And so what we're doing is we're patiently waiting for the other person to shut up because we just can't wait to tell what we want to tell. And so we're focused on what we want to say and only half listening to what they're saying. So we don't hear a word. We actually don't remember it. So here's the first thing. If you want to actually remember everything everyone says, the next time you have that impulse to share your anecdote or story when engaging someone, just don't be quiet. Being quiet is not listening. Being quiet just means you're shutting up. Listening is taking that content, which you wanted, that your brain is dying to share because your dopamine wants to go, your pleasure centers want to fire. Take it and toss it. Just get rid of it. Just say, I'm not going to talk about it because no one cares. They don't care. They care about what they're saying. Now focus back in on everything that's coming out of their mouth. And now you have a beautiful buffet. You have all the content, everything they're talking about is a priority to them. And now you can explore any one of those priorities because if it's coming out of their mouth, they're willing to talk about it. And so then you explore it with, hey, how did you decide to do that? When did you decide to do that? And my favorite always, what kind of challenges did you face when you did that? Challenges questions are the most fantastic to me because everyone has challenges, even if it's something that someone's really good at. You know, Eric, you are a fantastic podcaster. You're a fantastic interviewer. What are your challenges along the way? You could probably book on them, probably. Sure. You know, and when you answer that, what I'm hearing all your priorities. And so I'm going to remember everything you said when you do that.
Perfect. Now I'm going to wrap up with 2 more questions out of here.
There's so many good ones too. I wish we could get them to them all.
Oh, I know. Well, and they're having a conversation with themselves, which is awesome too. So
that's good.
Definitely, you can follow up later. And folks, if you have any other questions or comments, please put them in the comments and I will try to answer myself or reach out to Robin.
Absolutely.
And that helps the video be discovered later for other people as well. So it's great all around. So we have from JLW. I like how this is not just about ascertaining what the other person is thinking / feeling, i.e. body language, but also about interacting with them. Yeah, it is
100% about how to interact with them. You know, a lot of us make a lot of assumptions and mistakes when we're interacting with people. And I'm so guilty of it. Matter of fact, I am still guilty of it. You know, I'm going to show you something funny. You know, my stack of books I keep my stuff on at least once a day, if not every other day. My wife will hold this up in front of me. I said, Robin, remember, it's not all about you. That's my first book. And because we're all hardwired for certain behaviors, and especially now when we're at home a lot, our natural behaviors come out, so our shields are down. When I leave this house or I'm doing one of these things, you know, here's the other thing too. I know a lot of people that are on. I am who I am. I am exactly the same at home as exactly as I am outside. When I was working, everything's exactly the same because I'm fully transparent. I don't put on a show anytime. I do try harder though when I'm engaging socially because that's why I had to write this book. My books are my manuals on how not to be the self-centered moron I was born to be. So yes, sometimes it takes a little effort.
All right. And last question, at least. If any of your recruitments were involved in criminal activity, how do you get over that hurdle for them to admit and want to cooperate? Mine would be, do you even care?
So it's interesting. I'll answer this in 2 different ways. In general, I didn't deal with criminals. I was very lucky. When you work in the world of counterintelligence, there's not and collecting intelligence and protecting companies companies and our infrastructure from, bad actors in the world. In general, we're working with some pretty decent people. On the espionage side, though, not only were they, the true espionage ones, not only were they committing espionage, but generally that was only one thing going sideways in their lives. They were doing a lot of them. Just look at Hansen. We'll just use Hansen because he's open source information. He was doing a lot of things wrong about money, just prostitutes. I mean, there's all kinds of weird things going on. And so,
right.
And so that's one aspect of it. But it really comes down what the mission is, and so I asked, so the way to inspire someone, because I always think of, you can't convince anyone to confess. I'm always thinking in terms of how do you inspire them to want to. So anytime I'm working with law enforcement, and I deal with a lot of street cops, a lot of experienced detectives, I always start out, very simply by saying, hey, how many of you all got someone to confess? That when it might not have been in their best interest, and all the hands go up. I said, great. How exactly did you do it? And they're all like, well, it's an assumed knowledge that over time and experience, they just have conversations. I said, well, let me help you. I'm going to give you some labels and meanings. I know exactly what you did. Did you not? Remember these 4 things I said earlier. Did you not seek their thoughts and opinions about what happened, what transpired, what led them up to the decisions that they made? I said, yeah, that's exactly what we did. I said, next, did you talk in terms of what was important to them, in terms of maybe a reduced sentence, maybe not letting family members know, whatever you could do to talk in terms of what's important to them, their priorities. I said, yeah. I said, then after they shared all the things they shared with you and all the choices that went a little sideways from their point of view when you asked about their thoughts and opinions, did you validate it? In other words, you sought to understand it, or did you judge it? And they said, oh, no, if you judge it, the shields go up. I said, all right. So you validated their experiences. And then did you ultimately empower them with choice about how to move forward? If they wanted to share with you exactly what the events were and confess to you, you could actually be a resource for them before the judge or the parole board or any of these other things, or they don't have to. It's really totally up to them. And they said, wow, that's exactly what we did. I said, yeah. So you sought their thoughts and opinions. You talked in terms of their priorities. You validated them and you gave them choices. Isn't that simple? I said, yeah, that's exactly simple. So whether I'm dealing with someone that has committed a crime and I'm trying to recruit them, or whether you're dealing with any human being, the big thing is always be curious and never, my last sign, I talk about emotional stability. One of the things you can do to really derail yourself with anyone, whether they've committed a crime or whether they've cheated on a test or whether they just, let their dog poop in your front yard, is show emotional reaction, a negative one. So say, someone drops what they think is going to be an emotional bomb on you by confessing that, well, I did this thing. And if you go, oh my God, what are you, nuts? You shouldn't have done that. They'll never talk to you again. As opposed to, that's pretty curious. What do you think you're going to do now? What are the challenges moving forward, and how can we mitigate it? That's generally the way I deal with everything. It's like, wow, I never quite experienced that before. What do you think we can do about it? Because what am I doing? I'm seeking their thoughts and opinions. I'm not judging. So in other words, you're validating and having that curiosity. That's how I do it.
Well, fantastic. Now, everyone can obviously get your books. Most recent one is Code of Trust, and then Sizing People Up just came out this year.
Shameless promotion.
That's not shameless. Well, I'm glad to have you here. And I understand you have a course that you've just finished that is available for folks. So they can become masters at this.
Yeah, I have 2. My first, I have 2 courses out, online courses. It's Not All About Me is the first one. It's quick rapport, and so it's about an hour of video. The second one is called The Code of Trust, 2 hours of video. Plus each course has a half hour of coaching with me. And I'll give everyone who's listening the secret code. If you do want to sign up for them, you get 25% off if you type in the coupon code. If you put People Formula 2020, all lowercase, all one word, People Formula 2020. If you're interested in, or if you want to email me, it's go to my website, peopleformula.com. I'm so easy to get a hold of, shamelessly, but no problem, especially now these days.
Well, awesome. And everything can be found at peopleformula.com.
Absolutely. I got a couple videos on there as well. Also, links. Matter of fact, Eric just added yours to the top of the list for all the podcasts I've been on. So if you want some more Death by Robin for podcasts, go do that. Subscribe to my newsletter, my community newsletter, because anytime I got a new course offering, new discounts, new podcast that comes out, I think is going to be relevant. get that. And it's just a great way to keep in touch and communicate, because I do consider it a community, because people that reach out for me and I communicate with, generally we're all like-minded. We're just trying to create those great relationships and trust that we need in our lives to move forward and be a resource for others.
All right. And now my shameless self-promotion. If you
Do
guys
it.
like this, I have killer guests coming. I have Robin here, and I have some that have already been on, so you can check out the YouTube channel and see them. I've got an interview coming out Saturday with John McAfee,
Ooh.
the guy himself who ran for president and is a very, very interesting individual. So please check out the channel. Please subscribe and check back in. I've got more great guests to come. For now, though, Robin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. And thanks for everyone that tuned in. It was a great time. Hope you had a good time tonight, too.